Welcome. Thank you for attending today's webinar hosted by the Organization Development and Change program at Penn State. Today, we have the great pleasure of welcoming our presenter, Dr. Eric Bergstrom. My name is Layla Farzam, and I am the Alumni Ambassador for the Organization Development and Change program. We also have Jenny Lee with us today, who will be managing our chat and Q&A features. In terms of the interactive format for this webinar, please open the chat feature in the Zoom platform to interact and ask questions for the Q&A segment. If for some reason you get disconnected from our presentation, please use the same Zoom link to re-enter. Our online Master of Professional Studies in Organization Development and Change can help you prepare to implement quality and continuous improvement initiatives in an organization. Furthermore, there's a Ph.D. program in workforce education and development with a concentration in human resource development and organization development. Our program has created a continuous monthly webinar series from experts around the world. Today, we welcome Dr. Bergstrom.
Dr. Eric Bergstrom is an assistant teaching professor in workforce education and development at the Penn State University. He is also a certified career transition coach, New Horizons retirement coach, and a certified organization development practitioner. Dr. Bergstrom has developed leadership programs and assessment for both Penn State Management Development as well as for the Pennsylvania College of Technology. His career includes working in private industry for over 24 years in a variety of human resources and manufacturing management positions in Fortune 100 companies. He has extensive experience in assessing, training, and coaching individual contributors and leaders, designing and implementing talent development programs and processes, and facilitating and leading change efforts as both an internal OD consultant as well as an external OD consultant. Here's Dr. Bergstrom.
Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar. This is kind of mission impossible because when I typically get involved in working with individuals on career transition or career planning, it could take somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 hours and would only cover a small slice of what we're going to be covering today. But I'm going to try to cover the overall, almost from a 30,000 foot level, what we do in terms of career planning and placement. During today's discussion, we'll be talking about some of the following things. First of all, who would benefit from today's discussion, the career change and what we're seeing, and this year certainly has given us some new things to say, factors that impact career transition within and across organizations, strategies for maintaining career direction, keeping yourself alive in the career, maintaining career momentum, and developing tools for career transition. So I'll be covering that. You know, before I start, career planning and career transition is part art and science. It's part planning using tools, but it's also part of that individual himself, their personality, their approach to life, their backgrounds, their experiences. It's also part skill planning and luck or opportunistic situations. Things come along that we would have never envisioned, but being on top of our game provides us the opportunity to get into those situations. And is part us and part others. None of us go about it alone. And so that's one of the things to remember as we go through this. So I guess the question is, who would benefit from today's discussion, or who would find value in today's discussion? One of the individuals would be individuals starting their career, desiring a roadmap for getting started. Some people that I've talked to have been as early as 6th grade. A lot of schools are now having children starting to explore what kind of career they may want to get into. Certainly if they're going to get into a technical field like career and technical association, career and technical studies, that they would be thinking about that as they get into high school. But also preparatory studies for college happen in the 8th, 9th, 10th grades. Individuals considering a job change or a career change would benefit from today. Individuals experiencing job loss. Certainly we've seen that in this past year. Graduate students that are working on their programs of study. and in workforce education development or other fields like that. Military personnel transitioning into civilian careers. We see a lot of people going into the military and after 3 or 4 years, then saying, okay, how do I leverage what I've done in the military, learning that I've done, the skills that I've developed into a civilian career. Individuals transitioning from work for to an entrepreneurial role. A number of people, as they go through their career, at some point in time say, you know, I wouldn't mind teaching at the college or university level, the things that I've learned in private industry or in public service. Things that, and also transitioning into an entrepreneurial role in terms of starting up a new business. And then finally, individuals navigating career change relative to life cycle progression. We used to call that retirement, but that word isn't used as much anymore. It's more of a life cycle progression or change, looking forward to that next stage. So let's go to the next slide. So the changes in the career, what are we seeing? Well, if you look at my father and my father-in-law, my father's 93, he was with one organization for his entire career. And so prior to 1980, you saw 30-year, 40-year, 50-year employee tenures with the same organization. And that will be increasingly rare for a variety of reasons. Responsibility for career planning and development has transitioned from an employer-led to employee-owned and operated. Took that phrase from some other industries. But it used to be back in the 70s and 80s and even before, there was a plan put in place and you followed the plan for career transition or career development and staying with that same organization. Now it's really up to the individual, to the employee, with assistance. Some organizations do a fine job in helping employees navigate through careers through a variety of things I'll talk about in a few minutes. But it really is employee owned and operated at this point in time. Back in the day, I know back in the early 80s when I was moving from one position to the other, I was cautioned, maybe chastised by my father about don't be a job hopper. Because that was the perceptions back in the 70s and 80s, that if a person moved from one job to the other on a regular basis, they were job hoppers. They were not dependable. But changes in the way we look at work and the relationships between employers and employees have changed over the years. So the job hopper title or stigma has kind of reduced. The 401k portability. We see a lot of negotiating hiring agreements. When people come to an organization, they negotiate salaries, they negotiate weeks of vacation, things of that nature, and then golden parachutes at the other end. And then finally, shifts are occurring, what we believe are perceived to be retirement. And I talked about that a few minutes ago in terms of people are saying, I don't know that I'll ever retire, but I may change what I do day in and day out. Let's go to the next slide. So what are some of the factors that impact career transition within and across organizations? Well, there's the education, experience, and credentials of the person. We've seen increasingly in the marketplace, organizations asking for credentials, especially in organizations or in positions like for HR, talent, training and development, even when you get into Lean Sigmas and organizations that are practicing Lean and Six Sigma. Credentials. Experience and education. Used to be that if you worked hard, you showed up for work every day, you would have a career. And that was back in the 70s and 80s and even before that. Now they're looking for education, they're looking for experience. What also varies from person to person are the aspirations, the interests. And I often ask the person who is looking for a job, are you running away from something or are you running to something? I recently asked a friend of mine if they were doing that as they were looking at moving from an employer that they were somewhat disgruntled with. And then finally, the life stage, and I've talked about that. Where is the person in their journey? Are they at a point where they're saying, okay, my children have graduated from college, we are empty nesters, we're comfortable in our life, now I'd like to do something that's more of a calling than it is a job. And so life stages play into that. Early in the career, midlife, later in the career. Then the organization has something to do with that. Yesterday or 2 days ago, I was just talking to somebody about a merger acquisition that went on with a company that I used to work with. And we were talking about the highs, the lows of mergers and acquisitions, and the good and the bad and the ugly. And so people, because of mergers and acquisitions, all of a sudden find themselves in a career transition situation, either that they were accessed out, or they are just not really happy with the way that the organization is going with the new leadership team. Life cycles and maturity of the organization and industry. Some organizations as startups are great to work with, and then all of a sudden as they get into that maintenance level of organization, things change. Ownership and leadership changes. We've seen both in terms of ownership and leadership, where an entrepreneur does a great job starting a business and is really good at it, but when it comes to running a business, that entrepreneur isn't so great. And so there's been ownership changes. There's also been ownership changes at the highest level of Fortune 100 companies and leadership changes. And then finally, initiatives and opportunities. They can be good as organizations take on additional initiatives. They may have a need for talent to come in that has specific skill sets, and that may be a great opportunity to transition across or to another organization. And within an organization, when that organization goes that way. And then finally, economic conditions, and we've seen that this year. This year, we've seen a lot of flexibility, a lot of change, a lot of work on the part of people to be able to navigate, just to do their own jobs through this COVID-19. Let's move on to the next slide. Career transitions within organizations. This is kind of exciting because I've been involved in every one of these. Succession plans. Succession plans where the leadership looks at their depth chart. They look at their people. They look at where they're going. They look at their strategic plan. They say, do we have the talent that we need to move the next level or to continue on? And succession plans will take people and actually assess, are they high potentials? Are they career, they're in the right career and they should stay there? Or are they individuals that need either coaching or are not in line with where the organization's going? Management training programs. I've been a part of one of those, and I've been responsible for several of them, where we had mentoring and craft reserves, bringing people from a craft position or from an hourly position into a leadership supervisory position. So we've had transitions like that. Dual career paths. Back in the day, back in the 70s and 80s, and maybe even today in some organizations, the best way to get ahead, both financially and positionally, would be to move into a leadership role. But as we all know, some of the best technical people don't make the best supervisors or leaders. And so organizations, in order to prevent people from leaving that are very good at what they do and are excited about the technology that they're working on, have created dual career paths where, let's say, for example, an engineer could go the engineering leadership role or way, or they could go the senior engineer fellow type of way. So dual career paths, that's pretty good within organizations. Special assignments, internships, job swapping, remote assignments. I've seen that all over the map in terms of a person doing work here, and then because they were successful here would be then transitioned to another location, maybe part-time, maybe a couple days a week, maybe for 6 months, whatever the case may be. That could be remote assignments, that could be special assignments. Internships, even if a person has been with the organization for 10 years, they could go in an internship within the organization. And then zigzagging career paths, gradual or staged retirement. Zigzagging is basically not every move up is the right move. It could be lateral moves that would give the person the skills and abilities. I know my father-in-law, when he was in business and industry, made several lateral moves in order to develop the competencies required for the next lot higher level position. So you see that. You see gradual and staged careers where people will start reducing their number of hours and they'll be mentoring the replacement, their protege, and then returning as a contracted consultant in some cases, where the person has retired and doesn't want to be there all the time, and the company actually doesn't need them there all the time, so they bring them back as contracted consultants at some point in time. Let's go to the next slide. And then career transitions across organizations. Transitions across organizations where you have people bringing special skills and certifications. I've worked with individuals that are Black Belt Six Sigma or Lean Sigma experts or ISO experts. Or in the healthcare industry, you may have somebody that is excellent at Malcolm Baldrige Award criteria and achieving Malcolm Baldrige Award. You'll see those people going from organization to organization, usually within their specific industries, but not always. I've seen people go from one organization in one industry to another organization in another industry, but taking those specialized skills like Lean Sigma. Transitioning within specific industries like healthcare, banking, food manufacturing. A lot of employers, a good number of employers, like to hire people that have the specific industrial experience, whether it be healthcare, banking, food manufacturing. So where an individual may be interested in getting into, let's say, healthcare, because they have not come up within the healthcare arena, a lot of times they will be not as competitive as somebody that has maybe less specific skills, but has the strong healthcare background. So we see transition between industries at times. Transitions within specific functions, HR, environmental health and safety, facilities engineering, those functions, accounting, finance. You'll see people going from one organization to another in those functions. People that possess and bring key competencies to an organization to create a fresh approach, like change management, like organization development, where they bring those competencies in to help the organization move to the next level. And then also transitioning into an organization to do something new. That's a personal decision a lot of times. And I've had a number of people that I've coached over the last couple of years that have said, I'm just tired of this environment, and we can see that in some, like for example, a couple of the people that I've worked with in the past have been in the food industry, in the restaurant industry. And restaurants are very busy organizations that are hard to stay with. And especially with what we've experienced this past year, there may be people that say, hey, I'm looking for a new personal direction so that I don't have to be at the place, married to the place, 6-7 days a week, or that I have an income when something like COVID-19 comes along. And then transition from a doer to a coach or teacher. I've seen a number of people, especially as they get into their 50s and their 60s, that say, okay, I've been there, done that. Now I'd like to coach others to do it, or I'd like to teach, either as a consultant or as a college, university professor. And so we've seen that. Let's go to the next slide. So what are some strategies for maintaining a career direction? And this really gets into that who, what, when, where, why, how kind of approach. Know who, what, and where you want to be, and focus and maintain the focus on that outcome. It's really kind of finding your whether it's your calling, whether it's your role in an organization, whether it's something that you can really enjoy and embrace. That's important, and it changes over time. I know mine has changed over time. Take and maintain an inventory of you. Create a personal marketing portfolio. And I'll get into this later on in the presentation, how to do that. So I'll just leave that at that there right now. Map your path. Create a roadmap, a career GPS. If your next step is this or your next step is that, how do you make that next step? Who do you need to know? What kind of training do you need to receive? What networking is helpful? What special assignments would be helpful? Those kinds of things. Do the paperwork, and this is the actual versus the electronic. Keep your resume up to date. Keep your LinkedIn profile up to date. Keep your examples of things that you've done as a portfolio. So do the paperwork and keep the paperwork, actual or electronic. And then network, network, network. Those of you that have worked with realtors, they say location, location, location is what it's all about when it comes to house selling and house buying. Well, in career development, it's network, network, network. It's network within your industry. It's network within your community. It's network within your development or your next door neighbors. It's network within your charitable organizations. It's networking within your community organizations. Join and participate. And that's not just join and participate in LinkedIn groups, but join and participate in alumni associations, join and participate in community organizations, join and participate in professional organizations. And involved in others in your career planning, as opposed to having others plan your career for you. In other words, look for mentors, executive sponsors, recruiters, and people to network with. I personally have 3 or 4 mentors right now that I work with, and I network with them, and I mentor with them, and I meet with them for different reasons. One of them is personal, one of them is professional, one of them is in my teaching and my consulting, and one of them is kind of a blend of all 4. And so having mentors that you check in with on maybe every month or maybe every 2 months basis, or get together for a cup of coffee is part of maintaining your career. Let's go on to the next slide. So maintaining the momentum in your career involves a lot of things. And so your professional career development involves networking, as I've said, targeted research. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be some kind of research hound or college professor that's going to do article abstracts and things like that. It's really researching and knowing the industry. As I said, I met with a supervisor 2 days ago at a company I used to work with. And he's done research about a company that may be acquiring them so that he can answer employees' questions. He is clearly ahead of the curve in terms of knowing more about the company that may be acquiring their company than most people, including managers in that organization. Targeted research. Professional interviews. And that doesn't mean that you keep on interviewing for jobs. That means that you interview people professionally. What do they have in terms of skill sets or experiences that you would like to learn from? And that then gets into maybe a mentoring relationship, which is the next block, mentors, collaborators, and coaches. You know, collaborators and coaches, but collaborators is really interesting because it's maybe sometimes that you're in the same industry or in your same organization or whatever, that you collaborate on special projects with that, or even nonprofit organizations that you're a board member of, that you collaborate with people, that it builds everybody's understanding of you and the qualities that you possess. Professional organizations. For an HR person, it could be SHRM. There's all kinds of professional organizations around. And finally, LinkedIn groups. This is an area where there have been times when I have spent probably an hour to an hour and 15 minutes on a person's LinkedIn profile, just that. And then we did a round 2, and then maybe a round 3. So this whole career development piece, and that includes also LinkedIn groups where you can do some targeted research. You'll see some nice research coming out of LinkedIn groups. So maintaining your career momentum is a process. It's a process that can't die. So if somebody would come up to you and say, could I see your most recent resume? And you say, that's kind of old, then you're clearly not keeping the career momentum where it should be. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is my favorite slide. I tried to find a way to capture the stages where the information that a person would want to have about themselves to be career ready. And these are the pieces, and it's a pyramid because the top part of the pyramid is the least amount of information, and the bottom part of the pyramid is the most amount of information. Cards, business cards. Do you have a personal business card that is not your business card? Do you have a personal business card that has information about you on the front that people can contact you, but on the back, it kind of gives people a snapshot of what is your residual message. What is it that you are? I was talking to one of my he's not even a peer, he's more of a mentor on career transition. He really taught me a lot as I was getting into career transition. And he was saying that he was pushing an executive to put a message on the back of his business card. Front was his information, back was his information, or was his message. And that executive was on his final interview, and he was interviewing with the chairman of the board of the organization that he was trying to secure a position with. And that chairman of the board flipped the card over, read his personal message, and said to the person, describe that. And you could imagine the sweat that would be rolling down the person's face if they didn't have a good story to tell about that. On the other hand, later on, he found out that that was what secured him the position among other people that they were looking at. So personal business card with a personal message on the back. One-page documents. There are a lot of one-page documents, networking profiles if you're going to be networking. Profiles with a picture so that you, if you were going to be asked to present at a conference, that they would have your picture and they would also have your information about yourself. If you're in transition, if you're leaving a position, if you're being accessed out, if you're caught in a merger and acquisition and you've been laid off, your exit statement, why are you leaving? Your elevator speech or your 30-second commercial, what are you looking for? The commercial positioning statement, what is it that you're really looking for in that next position? And a cover letter template that kind of gives pieces about your background. Then the third block, which is purple on this slide, is your 2-page resume. Usually you can get into 2 pages. I've seen people with very extensive backgrounds get their resume into 2 pages. References, professional, networking, and personal, volunteer, and a cover letter, a long version. And then you get into LinkedIn profile. And this, again, is where I spend a lot of time with people in terms of who are the individuals to include in your networking contacts. Who are the people that know you best, who can identify with you and for you your competencies, the things that they would want to endorse you for. And also look at things like your accomplishment statements. What are your accomplishment statements? What have you done? And they should be full of metrics. Summary of accomplishments. Summary of certifications, licenses, awards. All those things that you see on LinkedIn profile, keeping those up to date. And then there's the CV, the curriculum vitae. This is used more for people that are going to go into academic areas. I know my CV is probably about 10 or 12 pages. I've seen CVs that are in the neighborhood of 60, 70 pages because those individuals have done quite a bit of publishing and have written books and have been presenters at many professional organizations. And so every time they do something, it goes onto their CV, almost updating their CV on a weekly basis. But a CV is good for an individual who is going into an academic setting, or if a person has done a significant amount of research and would like to get into higher level research or get into very strong leadership positions where their technical background is required. Or like I said, if they're going from one level to the next within a college environment, from assistant professor to associate to professor. All those things would be helpful to have an updated and vibrant CV. And then the career mind map with residual message. I'm going to go into that next and talk about that. But it's really a mind map that allows you to capture everything that you possibly can capture about your background experience on one page, on one chart, on one diagram. And I'll show you a couple examples of mind maps in the future slides here. And then finally, the complete background is everything. It includes the experiences that you've had both inside and outside of work. It may include the type of person you are. It includes past performance review, project plan summaries, past emails that you've received from people that were kudos for work that you've performed, discussions with current and former colleagues, everything that is your complete background. And that's the stuff that I put on a mind map. So let's go to the next slide. So this is a mind map I simply pulled off of the internet. But if you look at the center of this mind map, where it says job search, that is where I would say that's where you place your residual message. Where that would be where you put a 2, 3, 4, 5 line, well, not 5 line, but 5 word or 2 or 3 line statement that says, this is who I am and this is what I do. And it's a residual message. And so as you look and you see on the sides of the job search center block, there are some boxes on the left side, and there's some boxes on the right side. That's where you may place your functional experiences. For example, for me, I have been an HR manager. I've been an OD manager. I've been HR professional, HR manager, OD professional, OD manager. I've been a college professor. I've been an instructional designer. I've been a training manager. And so each one of those major areas would fall into one of those boxes. And then the little light blue lines that are tangential could include things like, what were the projects I worked on? Who are the people that I worked with? What were the significant accomplishments that I've had? And you do that for all your positions that you had. So you could literally have 20 positions within your career, and you could have 20 of these multicolored blocks, and then have people's names, what you've done, those kinds of things. It's a way of data dumping your whole experience. And this is an organic document. This is something that you may have rolled up that you bring out periodically. I'm actually making a space for mine in my office at home here. And what you do is, if you find people's names, or if you remember people's names because you remember a project that you did, those people's names are then the people that you contact in LinkedIn and ask if they would endorse you for something that you've done. Or if you're being interviewed for a position and you have this kind of diagram on the wall, they may say to you, especially if you're in a COVID-19 scenario and you're being interviewed like I'm talking to you right now using a webinar or Zoom, you may look at that and they may say, can you provide for me an example of a time when you did blank? And you could look up at that, you could find the place, and you would trace it back to your residual message. So you would say, this is an experience that I had back then when I was an HR manager at this organization, and I had to increase our staffing by 30% because of brand new plant expansion. And then you can follow that back into your residual message. And that's how I did such and such. The residual message, I can't underscore I have to really emphasize the importance of a residual message, because the residual message is the lasting impression that you leave with people that you're talking to. It's kind of the end of your elevator speech. It's kind of the end of each of the things that you talk about when you're interviewing. Because if you're being interviewed and there are 10 other candidates, when they're debriefing all the candidates, somebody will say, and that's the person that said such and such, your residual message, and everybody will remember you. So this is a way to capture your total experience and use that then to build your pyramid. Let's go on to the next slide. Same kind of thing. It's I included this because it talks about those things that you may want to include on your LinkedIn profile, and also include on your mind map, your current skills, your interpersonal skills, languages, technical skills, those kinds of things. and then your preferences, possibilities, and education. So I included this as another example of mind map, but this really has some nice pieces that would be very relevant for both your LinkedIn and your mind map. Let's go to the last slide, or the next slide. So the question becomes, how do you take all this stuff and develop your career planning and transition guide? And you really start from the bottom up. You start from your complete background and you create that mind map. When I have rolls of paper that I secured from a printing company. They're the end of the rolls that they're going to throw away. And it's something that I can, and some of them are like 36 to 48 to 60 inches wide. So I can have almost a 4x8 sheet of plywood size sheet of paper on my wall and then use Post-its to start putting, here are the positions that I've had, here are the experiences that I had, and put them in there. And you know, as you talk to people that you remember from the organizations and from the experiences, they remind you of things that you forgot. And so your complete background is looking at your complete background, trying to place it on the career mind map. And then from there, you're able to pick and choose what goes into your CV if you need to put one together, what goes into your LinkedIn profile, what goes into your networking contacts, what goes into your summary sheets, those things, what goes into your resume, what are the one-page documents. And when you look at the whole mind map, you stand back and you say, what does this say about myself? Or ask other people, what does this say about me or about me as a person? What would you say if you looked at my complete mind map? They will help you put together the information for the back of your cards. So it's really, this is the process that I work through with people that I connect with, and in career planning and transitioning. And it's a process that can be used by anybody, by everybody. And as I said, it depends on the individual. In summary, it depends on the individual. It depends on where the individual is at in their career. It depends on where they're at in terms of their level of satisfaction. It depends on what it is that you're transitioning to. Is it transitioning away from a day-to-day, or is it transitioning into a new role or into a volunteer role, or whatever the case may be? So I've talked for roughly 40 minutes. I'm going to open up now for questions and answers.
Yes, thank you for your great presentation. I found that some questions are out there. So the first question is about the environment factor affecting career transition. So how do you stand out during times like we're in, especially if you are changing organization?
That's a great question. And you know, it's the best answer I've heard from people, and I connect with a lot of people that do what I do, is that you can't wait to be reactive. You have to be proactive through the process. So it's not, you know, all of us have seen what's happened in the environment this year, and I hate to keep on bringing that up, but a lot of people have found themselves into a situation where they need to change, and they need to change careers, and they need to change industries. And so the best way to deal with that is to have that work done well ahead of in a situation coming up. So when I've just talked to a young lady that just is in the process of securing a position, and securing a position is great, but you don't rest on your laurels. You don't just say, that's good, now I'm done. No, you keep going, you keep at it, you keep networking, because the networking and the relationships and those things are going to get you the next position when things get tough. And it is a relationship business. Let's not kid ourselves. It's a relationship business. How many of us have received job offers or have gotten into jobs because they knew us, we knew them, and yeah, we were part of the pool, but it was that relationship that really got us into the position or got us the job. So it's the work that you do now when you're not in crisis mode, and the relationships, that whole maintaining career momentum, working that process, writing articles for LinkedIn groups, connecting with people in LinkedIn. Because when organizations are looking for people, they look at LinkedIn groups, and they look at the people that are doing great work on LinkedIn groups, or people that they've talked to on LinkedIn groups. Hope that answers the question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, being proactive is the key, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So the next question is also connected with the previous question.
Mm-hmm.
So as you know, AI is the key factor when it comes to HR functions these days. So I've also heard a lot that recently organizations are using AI for the screening process. So how do you make your CV stand out when technology is a huge factor?
Well, let's go the opposite direction. How do you when you do your resume, and when you do any kind of documents, you need to make sure, number one, they're picture perfect. I've heard stories of people that have done LinkedIn profiles, and they had misspellings in their LinkedIn profile that caused people to say, boy, if that person can't get it right on their own LinkedIn profile and have that right, then, I need to question that. The other thing is that a lot of our resumes, people like to have really nice, eye-appealing resumes, but some of the applicant tracking systems do not accept all the bells and whistles that we put on resumes. I prefer to have a kind of a plain Jane resume that I'm going to be sending electronically. And then if I get somebody to say, hey, I'm interested in looking at you because I what I saw in the resume, then I would send a more by email, because I've been connecting now by email. I would send a more eye-appealing resume to them. But you have to be careful, because I've heard of applicant tracking systems that, and I just talked to somebody 2 days ago where they were saying, oh, maybe that's why they're not receiving my resume, because I've heard they'd never received my resume. And some of these applicant tracking systems, you have to remember, some organizations still have old applicant tracking systems. And if you have a bunch of lines or a bunch of different script or those things on your resume, it can knock you out before you even get in the door. So just be careful that you're not too over the top with fanciness that doesn't even get you in the door. Get in the door, and then you can send a nice fancy resume to an email address.
Thank you for the answer. So next question is about how to find a high-level position. So high-level positions are typically not accessible via sources like LinkedIn. So besides LinkedIn, can you give advice to seekers who are targeted high-level positions?
Yeah. Well, when you're looking for a position, you really look. There are a variety of ways there are a variety of sources to go to. Recruiting groups are often the best source, because I know when I was doing some recruiting, and when I was working for an organization that was a recruiter, there were organizations that contacted us and said, this is my position, I would like you to fill it for us, or at least get us candidates that we can fill it. So going to recruiter is a good way. And even within recruiters, you have breakdowns. You will have recruiters that are venture capital types of recruiters that are very good at knowing what organizations out there are looking for people to do turnarounds in organizations, that type of thing. So recruiters. Again, networking within your community, networking within your industry, that works really, really well in terms of those positions. There are also sites that you can go to for recruiting, for CEO types of positions that are out there. But it really, the recruiters and the recruiters and the networking are the two best. And then there's, like, you can go on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also, but LinkedIn is more for, I would say, well, it's for anybody, but because I've heard executives that I've worked with getting hits from LinkedIn and getting contacts from LinkedIn. But a lot of them are working with recruiters, and they're working with specific recruiters.
Thank you. So next questions are about networking. So
Yeah.
how do you cultivate mentors, and how do you network with people who you don't know?
Okay. Well, that's a good comment. There's a couple things. First of all, surprisingly enough, there are networking groups in just about every major city. So if I wanted to network with people in Philadelphia, there are probably multiple networking groups in Philadelphia. There are also networking groups by organization or by function, HR, materials, whatever the case may be. There are networking groups by industry. There are networking groups by level of the organization. That's where you get into some of the CEO networking groups, and you kind of find out about that through other CEOs or other people that you know. You can Google and find networking groups. So if I wanted to find networking groups in a given city, I could just get on and Google and say networking groups in whatever city, and you can find networking groups. There's networking that's going on with a lot of organizations, like SHRM would have networking groups. Also networking groups that exist through LinkedIn, networking group. So networking that way, but also networking in terms of people that you know, within let's say that you're probably restricted to a locality because of children being in school or needing to watch or take care of elderly parents or whatever the case is. So networking within your community is important too. And that's where some private or some face-to-face networking with people is important. But many, many people would love to just have a cup of coffee, sit down and talk, especially if they don't think you're looking for a job. And it goes back to the point, don't wait until you're looking for a job to create all these relationships.
Thank you. So the next question is about the OD professional's job. So what are the typical non-HR jobs that experienced OD professionals can take, such as strategy planning? So
Say that again. I'm not sure that I understand that.
Yeah, what are the typical non-HR jobs that experienced OD consultants can take?
Oh, well, OD, it's interesting because OD, as you know, is from the bottom up. And so really what you're talking about is an organization that values getting input from people within the organization. So for example, organizations I've been a part of where they've practiced Lean Sigma have used OD approaches. In fact, one of the students that I have in one of my courses for Lean Sigma right now has worked for a number of organizations that where she's done Lean Sigma. And her comment is when it worked, there was an OD component to it. When it didn't work, there was not an OD component to it. And when it lasted, there was an OD component to it. And when it didn't last, OD was absent. And so the idea is that in a case like that, and a number of the students that I have in classes that I'm teaching, from an OD standpoint, they're doing things other than OD. They're doing work within an organization to practice OD where they're at versus being the OD manager. So it's kind of like there's probably OD in many, many, many positions, a component of OD, just like there's a component of HR in every leadership position. Every leader does HR to some degree, some part of HR, whether it's interviewing, whether it's performance evaluation, whatever. Likewise, there's OD, or there can be OD in every position that we do, because one thing we know is change is constant. And OD, when you have people within the organization, all people in the organization feeling that they are a part of the process, that's a step towards success. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah. The next question is, what is a residual message and how do I start a residual message? What do I need to incorporate in?
Okay, so a residual message is really the statement that you want people, it's really what you want to be known for. So I'm in the process right now of reorganizing my office here at home, and I've run across a couple books that I haven't read for a while, but one of them was Achieving Profits with and Through People. That doesn't mean that you're like driving people to get things done. It means that you value people and you think that the best way for a company to be successful is with and through their people. And you do everything that you can to engage people in helping the business to become more successful. So you could put a residual message. So that's how I help the organization to be successful with and through people. So that would be like a residual message, or something a little bit longer than that, but on the back of the card. But it's the thing that at the end of the day, you want to be known for. If somebody was to say, "Oh yeah, I've met so-and-so, or I met so-and-so," they would almost be able to say, "Well, yeah, that person's great," because they really know how to get people involved, which really benefits the organization. It's kind of a way of saying profitability with and through people. So the residual message is just that catchy phrase that describes what you stand for.
Thank you. So next question is about CV. So how do you cut a CV down when a candidate has a lot of experience? I mean, the decades of experiences.
Well, some people would say you don't. I mean, I was just talking to Dr. Rothwell, who has one of the most impressive CVs I've ever seen. And everything that he's done and does is on that CV. And I think that the CV, they may say to you, "We want to know about this part of your experience," or "We want to know about that part of your experience." But the CV really gives you the totality of what you've done that would be of interest to that organization. And I'm not sure that you would cut it down. Cutting down your background would be a resume, or it would be a LinkedIn profile. Kind of if you look at that pyramid again, from the top to bottom, your resume is a two, sometimes people have 3 pages, but and the LinkedIn profile has a lot more in it because you have people doing endorsements and you have a bunch of competencies that are identified. You may have 9 or 12 competencies listed on your resume, but you may have 30 of them on your LinkedIn profile. So, your CV is a bigger piece than either one of those. And from your CV, you distill it down to a LinkedIn profile, and then you distill it further down to a resume. But I think your CV is a nice way to capture everything you've done, especially dates and times.
Thank you. So one of the participants said, my life cycle progression, like especially retirement, is moving from a top leadership role in an education organization to what's next. So he or she is interested in consulting in public or non-public sectors. So can you talk about moving from one major industry to another?
Sure. Well, and I'm not sure that that's moving from one major industry to the other. I have a friend right now that was a business manager for a large school district and was very, very good at what he did. Received awards for what he did, was valued by taxpayers for how conservative he was. Yet they had a lot of good programs at the school district. So he consulted by moving lateral into helping other school districts manage their finances or get their financial picture into order. So he went from being a doer business manager to a consultant of business managers. And what was neat about that was he was getting referrals from the state. Either the state was letting school districts know this person has done a good job and other school districts like what this person's done, or the state may request that he help a school district with some problems and that kind of thing. So it depends on what you're going into. Consulting, you're really moving from a doer to a consultant type role. Now there's different ways to do that. For me, I didn't want to go through all the self-marketing part and all the work that it goes in terms of putting proposals together and all those things for organizations. So I joined a consulting firm where I could have them represent me to their clients. And so I was doing consulting work, but I wasn't going through all the headaches of putting together, proposals and those kinds of things. I would help out with proposals, but I would not be doing all the work on that. There was a salesperson or a development person doing that for me. So one stage would be to go from doing the work to going to a consulting firm that does that work. Like if you were a black belt Six Sigma, you could go to a consulting firm that has black belt Six Sigmas and they help out. Or you could go to an organization that does those things. Or if you were going to do it on your own and be a consultant, say that you were an HR manager and now you want to do HR consulting, then you'd go the route of probably creating a business, creating a website, creating a business, getting an LLC set up or some kind of financial situation set up, and then putting together a marketing piece and just going through the steps that an entrepreneur would go through. One of the things that I do with organizations is I help them, if a person wants to be an entrepreneur, look at going through how do you create a business yourself. Another way to do it is buy somebody else's business. So you could go and work for another business, a consulting firm, to get your feet wet, and you can even do that while you're working now, just to test drive it. Or you could buy an existing business. I've seen that happen in cases of recruiting, headhunting, whatever you want to call it, recruiting. Or you could then, full blown do the consulting yourself.
Great. This would be the last question. So
Okay.
I think you can share your experiences about career transition, because according to your vita, you're working as a professor and practitioner. So how did you prepare for those jobs in your career path? Because many people here would like to pursue academic jobs as an OD practitioner. So what advice would you give to an experienced OD practitioner who would like to start this career transition?
Okay, that's a good question. I think that in every case, I started doing the work part-time before I went full-time. So I was working for a Fortune 100 company as an HR manager, and when, in this case, Penn State and a couple other colleges asked me if I'd be interested in being an adjunct professor. And so I did that. And I found that I liked doing it. And so I continued to do more and more and more of it. And I thought to myself, when I retired or when I decided to go a different direction than working in this private industry, that I would teach. Likewise, when I was doing some work, I worked with a career transition firm. Unfortunately, I was involved in helping organizations downsize. So I worked with career transition firms when I was in private industry, and I learned what they did. And I decided, because after several workforce reductions, that if I ever had the chance, I would want to help people transition careers and get themselves back up on their feet if they were laid off, as opposed to being the person that was helping the organization determine what headcount we needed. And so then I worked part-time with organizations. So gradually going into it part-time and then finding the balance is the way to go, I think.
Thank you so much for being with us today, Dr. Bergstrom. So it's time to wrap up. So Leila?
Mhm.
I would like to thank Dr. Bergstrom for sharing his knowledge, expertise, and wisdom with us today. If we did not get to your question, please feel free to send us an email, which you can find on your screen. On behalf of the OD&C program, we hope that you found this webinar helpful. Registrations for all other events can be found on all of our social media platforms, and feel free to visit our website. Thank you all for attending today, and we hope to have you back on November 20th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Feel free to share our webinar series with your networks and social media platforms, as all are invited and welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.